There was actually a study that was 8 years long with 30,000 participants. They found that the people in this study who rated themselves as having the highest level of stress were 43% more likely to die by the end of the study. Only true, though, for those who also believed that stress was bad for them. The people who rated that stress was good for them were actually the least likely people to die in the entire study. So it turns out that stress is really only bad for us when we believe that it is bad.
Welcome to this new episode of Born to Unicorn. I have with me, I'm beyond excited, Dr. Johann D'Souza is a clinical psychologist specializing in helping high-performing professionals overcome anxiety and distraction and achieve peak performance. Dr. D'Souza holds a PhD and master's in clinical psychology from the University of Houston and a master's in psychology from Boston University. He has published over 20 peer-reviewed scientific articles and is a research affiliate at Harvard's Human Flourishing program. Johann, welcome to Born to Unicorn.
Thank you so much, Juan.
So let's talk about, we talked a little bit about this before, and that's the reason why I invited you to the podcast about, the psychology of entrepreneurs. Is anything that you see in the psychology of entrepreneurs that is different to other people that are not entrepreneurs?
Yes. So I think stress is a good way of putting it. There was actually a study that was 8 years long with 30,000 participants. One of the things they measured was stress. And they found that the people in this study who rated themselves as having the highest level of stress were 43% more likely to die by the end of the study.
Man.
Now, this was only true, though, for those who also believed that stress was bad for them. The people who rated that stress was good for them, they were actually, even when they had the highest levels of stress, they were actually the least likely people to die in the entire study. So it turns out that stress is really only bad for us, or it's at least most bad for us when we believe that it is bad. So I think one thing that entrepreneurs have different from an average person is they have more of a positive mindset towards stress, towards the adrenaline rush. This is how top performers live in general, like whether it's professional athletes or some musician. They love that adrenaline and they use it to push themselves into their highest performance, which is called flow. So that could be one thing that.
So what you're saying is stress is not negative, because we've been taught for many years that stress is bad, right?
Dr. Kelly McGonigal from Stanford has a great book called The Upside of Stress. She also has a TED Talk on this. There are many studies now showing that stress can in fact be good if you see it, if you frame it as good. So one of the studies was with Harvard undergrad students who are preparing to take the GRE, which is like the SAT that you take when you're already in college, you want to get into grad school. And half the students read a short paragraph before taking the practice test. And the paragraph simply said, we used to think that stress is bad for you, but now we know that it can actually increase your performance. So think of that before you take this GRE test. There's a very short paragraph like that. And those students scored significantly higher on the math section of the GRE. And then when they took the actual GRE 3 months later, they scored even higher, more than 60 points higher than the people who hadn't read that little paragraph. And there was no other difference between the two groups. There are many other studies like this showing that actually appraising stress positively increases performance.
But stress is not the same as burnout.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so the difference here is high short-term levels of stress versus long-term low levels. So The first one is primarily the adrenaline that we get. Those adrenaline bursts when we're facing a challenge that our body thinks we're not currently equipped to handle.
Uh-huh.
Get an adrenaline burst. And if we frame that positively, it gets channeled more from the body to the brain to increase our performance. Whereas if we have this constant threat mode, low level of stress and worry, maybe it's like generalized, indefinite, no particular target for it, then that's more levels of cortisol, which chronically lead to deterioration of the immune system and other
Oh,
mental health
wow.
problems. Yeah.
So
So that would be
basically,
more the burnout that you're
it
describing.
goes from a psychological problem to actually a physical problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's all related. So the difference would be there is a physical biological reality that we need rest and we need breaks in work. We need breaks throughout the workday. We need a break at the end of the workday. We need breaks, a longer break at least once during the week. Maybe we need a longer break during the year of a vacation. So yeah, so if we don't give provide those biological needs, then we'll experience burnout.
In the entrepreneurial world, we speak a lot about working full life, not full time, but full life. Um, and actually, if you're raising capital, one of the things investors ask you is if you are completely focused on the company, if you're putting all your time on it. Is it better to work more hours, or is better to have this moment of rest and be more organized?
There's this common illusion in our culture that effectiveness means working more, quantity over quality. And that's the person that looks better in the eyes of the boss, the guy who gets there early, stays late, is available at all times, is answering emails at 8 o'clock at night, on weekends, on holidays. Uh, so it gives a kind of positive image, the person who's very responsive to the team's messages and the emails. But Cal Newport has a great point in his book, World Without Email. So this is I believe he's a Georgetown professor of computer science and productivity guru. And he says that this is being like constantly available actually is detrimental to the ability to do deep work,
Hmm.
it, where the value comes from. Value doesn't come from checking email. Value comes from having really thinking deeply about your strategy and ideas, and then deeply executing that with your team. So yeah, I would. I'm a huge proponent of the quality over the quantity.
Interesting. The other option is not working enough, and I won't be competitive, right?
This is where the two different modes of working come in. So the first mode of working, which we often slip into, is called marathon mode. Marathon mode is start time, no stop time. It's kind of this indefinite blob of work in which we mix rest and work and do neither of them well.
Uh-huh.
So when we're working, we're thinking of of the times when we're not working, and when we're not working, we're thinking of what we could be doing to work more. So this is kind of like taking your steak and taking your chocolate cake and putting them in a blender and then drinking it like a smoothie. It's like neither one of those is enjoyable anymore. That's marathon mode. The longer the time elapses, the less motivated, the less energy we have. The alternative to that is sprint mode. Your energy and motivation levels increase as the deadline approaches. People experience this when they procrastinate. The reason they procrastinate in part is they feel this burst of energy release as the deadline approaches. Well, we don't have to be slaves to the circumstance of the external deadline. We can set the deadline for ourselves by creating a deadline of 30 to 90 minutes with using a timer. And then as that timer comes down, as we get close to the end of that sprint, then the body releases adrenaline to give us more energy to finish the task on time. So this way, we're getting more out of the work hours that we have, and then we're taking a 5 to 15 minute break in between in order to rest and recuperate. Because again, there is a biological need to have that rest. Our eyes need to rest. The brain needs to rest. We need to get up and to break out of our sedentary routine. So in this way, people actually end up working much more effectively than if they had worked 25%, 50% or more longer, but just ineffectively and distracted and without their heart really into it.
Is there any science supporting that? If you have like a more organized day and you stop and you have some rest, it the you can perform better than if you don't.
The science of this, the science of work, shows that the way that the brain identifies what is work as opposed to what is not work is, the research calls it duration, path, outcome. So duration means we have a sense of there is a start and there is a stop to it. Path is, we know we have a plan for how to get there, and the outcome is what the goal is. So anytime that we set a goal, we come up with an idea of how to get to that goal, and we set a stop time for it. That's when our brain recognizes, okay, we're doing work now. It's
Huh.
like very purposeful as opposed to rest, leisure, just spending time with family, just reading a book, just walking around outside. Um, so that is one way that the brain gets into work mode. The other thing is, this is something Andrew Huberman points out on his podcast, is um, the one healthy way for the brain to rest after staring at a screen or an object that's 12 to 18 inches away from your face for literally hours for a lot of people, is the way to rest is to um, unfocus your eyes and experience things passing you in your peripheral vision, passing through you. And so that sounds kind of weird, but you realize that the way that we experience that in ordinary life is when we're going for a walk. When you go for a walk uh, outside, we're not focused on anything in particular, and certainly not focused on something that's right in front of our face. And we just experience these things just passing us in our peripheral vision. So that is how the brain rests and cleanses itself.
Basically, what you're saying is there is a cycle, and our brain identifies work by something that is like a project. It starts, has a development, and you reach or you don't reach an objective, correct? In some companies, there is this um, uh, culture of creating things all the time, but never finishing them. How that affects the human psychology? Start something and waiting for a result or reaching an objective, and that objective never happens.
One step of work that's probably the least appreciated is the final step, which this French intellectual calls, named Serge Delange in his book The Intellectual Life. He calls it fruition. He didn't invent the name; it's a classical term. But
Mhm.
fruition is the enjoyment of the job well done. So in this hyper busy hustle and bustle life we live, we often just neglect this step entirely, not enjoying the job well done. And that's actually a step of the work, which motivates us then more for future work. And it helps us enjoy life, because at the end of the day, the purpose of life isn't work. The purpose of work is to serve our life. So let's slow down and enjoy our successes. And that also lets us process it, so that we solidify, what did I learn from this experience, and how does it fit into the greater purpose of my life? And then how can I apply that to my next project?
Well, you just mentioned something very, very interesting. You said you gotta enjoy, and each part of the process, and also our successes. Why is easier to remember the things that we didn't achieve than the things that we achieved? Why the human mind normally tends to get back to the negative things and not to the positive? And normally you have more positive things in a day than negative, but we never remember those.
Two things. One is the background attention, and the second is negative processing bias. Let's take those one by one. So, the background attention, there's actually two types of attention. We usually only think of one type of attention, which is called task attention, which is the
Uh-huh.
attention of working on the step in the present moment. But the whole time we're working on the step in the present moment, there is a background attention preparing us to do other things, preparing us ideally to do the next step. So one of the jobs of this background attention is it takes note of loose ends of unfinished tasks and reminds us of them in order to be helpful so we don't forget. The problem is this often serves as a distraction. If we're working on one thing or just trying to rest with our family, and then we have all the other loose ends coming to our mind, well, it's not very relaxing. And so this is why in getting things done, um, the gentleman's name is Allen, I believe is the author of that book. Is it David Allen? So he makes this point that the brain is for making ideas, not for holding ideas. So we want to get those loose ends out of our brain as quickly as possible, but through an organized, systematic process, whether it's writing it down on a notepad that not like a million different notes, but one place, or whether it's making a list on our phone, and some process to just offload those loose ends, so our brain is not constantly reminding us of that. Now, the second thing, so that's the background intention. The second thing is the negative processing bias. When people have a habit of anxiety or sadness, their brain actually develops a bias towards noticing negative stimuli that healthy people don't experience. And so one way that this is studied is they give a group of people uh, images of neutral faces, and they ask them to rate the expression of a face. The people with depression or anxiety are more likely to rate the neutral faces as being negative. So their brain is actually processing negative stimuli where there isn't, or it's more sensitive to picking up on negative stimuli. So we can break out of that over time by deliberately focusing on the positive, on the good. As you said, most of in our days there's much more good than bad, and if we deliberately focus on that, or even see the challenge as an opportunity rather than a threat, that will break us out of the negative processing bias.
So I will bring some different words, and I want to know what you have to say about the connection of those pessimism, entrepreneurship, obsessive compulsive behavior. Is there any connection with all those words and entrepreneurship? Do you think that
So I think the question is there a connection between pessimism, obsessing, and looking for threats? Yeah. So one thing that can happen if someone is um, habitually focused on the negative, uh, they can be experiencing a constant low level fear, which I call threat mode. So if you think of fear being from 0 to 10, where 10 is having a panic attack, threat mode would be like consistently we're at a 3. So we have consistently background worries from the time we first wake up. It's like the mind is just looking for something to start worrying about, and it latches onto that as quickly as possible, continuing throughout the day to the time we go to bed, and heads on the pillow, still worrying about things throughout the day. So that comes from a habit of internal and often external noise, as opposed to cultivating internal and external silence. And so this is a very important skill, which is greatly neglected, and in fact, not even seen as a goal for
hmm,
many people in our society. But our deepest peace and our contact with our highest ideals and the discovery of our true self only happens in the internal silence. The internal silence. So that is an antidote to worry. It's an antidote to how do you say, feeling meaningless, uh, and it's an antidote to distraction as well. So in order to contact our deepest focus and purpose in life, cultivating that internal silence by cultivating external silence and then practicing also mindfulness. So focusing on one thing at one time, starting with the breath, and it doesn't take a long time either. It can take a minute, a couple minutes a day, 15 minutes a day if you're generous, and you'll notice an enormous difference.
so multitasking is not a positive behavior.
It's not human, actually. So our brains are not like a series of computer processors built in parallel. Tech people know there's been like parallel and serial. processors. Parallel means it's working on multiple things at exactly the same time. Uh, a computer can do that, whereas the brain can't do that. It's working in series. It's working on one thing and the next. And then so what happens when we're attempting to multitask is we're just task switching very quickly. We're flipping very rapidly from one task to another to another. Now, the problem with that is there's friction in that transition. And so one way to look at it is if we're working on multiple tasks at the same time, you can just divide your IQ by the number of tasks you're facing. And that's how much IQ you're actually giving to any particular task, which is why if you're trying to listen to someone and type something at the same time, you might either slow down or you might type the wrong word or you might type the thing that you heard rather than the thing that you were thinking of, etc. So yeah, it is much more effective and calming, peaceful to work in sequential unit tasking. We'll put all our attention on one thing, then transitioning that, putting all our attention on the next thing, and so on.
Are there any like negative results if you keep doing like multitasking over and over again? If you build your career over, let's say, multitasking?
So I think that is one thing that leads to the elevated cortisol levels and threat mode. Because with multitasking, part of your brain, the background attention, which you talked about earlier, it's keeping an eye on the other tasks that we're not doing right now. So we're having uh, like a split attention. Um, over time, that when we build a habit of that, then we always have a split attention, even if we're doing something else or having a beer with a friend. Part of my attention is going to be thinking about something else because that's what it's used to doing. So I think that's one of the negative consequences of it. But people multitask because there's an illusion of accomplishment. Like, oh man, I'm working so hard right now. I'm getting so much done right now. So for high performing people, it's important to distinguish between the illusion of progress, which comes from feeling busy, to actual deep progress, which comes from putting all our attention on the most important thing and really crushing that, and then moving on, reprioritizing, and then moving on to the next thing, and so on.
Man, you're changing my entire mind. I mean, because all the things we are talking now, like multitasking and like feeling busy, and all, that's exactly how we build our, companies as entrepreneurs. We put all our mind, all our time, everything. And if you're not working, you feel like you're not moving forward. But you are kind of like um, uh, somehow saying that the way we need to build a company is totally opposite.
Yeah, if you want to be happy, and also I believe if you want to work more effectively. So uh, people often think that yeah, my success comes from the busyness and the multitasking and the being stressed out all the time. But I would say that your success is probably coming despite that. Probably if you work more, if you work smarter, actually slowed down to speed up, did more planning and put all your attention on one thing at a time, probably the effectiveness would actually increase.
Can you tell us a little bit about the psychology of the entrepreneurs and different, stages and how they can work to, be healthier?
But what I needed to bring to introduce here is the development from strategy to traction to momentum.
Mhm.
So this is the development of work. We start, as you said, in the beginning, the chaos, where we're not really sure what to do. So that's where we need to utilize a strategy.
Mhm.
How am I going to get to the goal? And then once we find that strategy, then we have something to lock onto and something to apply our effort to. Effort without strategy is just rabbit holes where we're just moving madly in one direction or another direction, but it's not getting us closer to the goal. So starting with the strategy, then we get traction. Now we're locked in. We know where we're going. We know that we have to uh, apply our effort on this specific step and then the next step. And then, so that's when we get really the sense of accomplishment that I am moving forward with my goal in a productive way. And then over time, that leads to momentum. Momentum is like a ball rolling downhill where now it doesn't, I know exactly what to do, and I just need to keep doing it and repeating it. And I don't have to think too much about it. I can keep moving forward. This is where people can start getting bored, which is where they can start to think about, well, is there any way that I can refine my approach so that I'm continuing to work more effectively? Does that answer your question? I think
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But on the other side, the stress should not be generated for a long period of time. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
yeah, you don't want uh, a constant negative mindset
Okay.
for a long period of time. Um, so uh, yeah, with the short, and that's where the breaks come in. The
Yeah.
breaks will even you out and so to reduce the cortisol levels and cleanse your brain. Whereas the adrenaline that's just released in short bursts for particular challenges. And so there, one of these study, an additional study which I haven't cited yet, found that those people who tell themselves "I'm excited" perform noticeably better on tasks than people who say I'm calm. They perform better on public speaking, in math calculations, in public singing, just
Hmm.
by saying I'm excited. And they actually did measure stress using saliva in these participants, and they found that the people who had said I'm excited, they did not have any lower levels of stress by doing that. So it's not that your performance increases because your stress is lower, but it's because your mindset changes, so your body utilizes the adrenaline in a different way.
When you build a company, at some point you believe that the company is part of you. And when you sell the company, part of you is being lost, right?
Ask yourself, what is my purpose of doing this? What is my purpose of working in this company? Is that the highest purpose in my life? And if it is, then we're going to feel lost and conflicted and depressed
Hmm.
after we sell the company. But if we can identify a higher purpose in which the company fits, then that purpose can persist after the company is out of our hands. For example, maybe these higher purposes include growing in knowledge, growing in skills, growing in ideals, and growing in relationships. So if the purpose of the company is for me to learn how to start a company, then that stays with me regardless of whether I'm in the company or not. And I can transfer that skill to other endeavors in my life. If the purpose of the company is to help me to become a wiser individual who's better at decision making and has great self control and fearlessness and courage, in pursuing the true and the good. Well, that persists with me after the company is gone. I can apply that to anything else as well, and also I can grow in those ideals in other activities of my life, not just in the company itself. If the purpose of the company is for me to be able to provide for my family and to be able to be philanthropic and donate to causes that I think do a lot of good in society, well, then that purpose persists after the company is gone, and I can shift my attention towards how to fulfill those goals. So I think the challenge comes when people see the company as the highest good, and then that's when you see how the other things collapse in their life, like their own health, their personal relationships, even their family, and their happiness. And that's why people get depressed sometimes after they exit the company.
Well, that's super interesting. I have here a research from Yale that shows that 80% of the people believe that if they sell their company, if they make money with their business, a lot of money, they will be happy. But just after they sell the company, only 10% feel happier than before. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So the way, I mean, there's a lot of layers to that, but one layer on a chemical level is the way dopamine works. So dopamine is the pleasure molecule, but they call it the molecule of more. In fact, I think there's a book with that very title about dopamine. Because the idea here is the body releases dopamine when we complete the steps on the way to the goal. It actually doesn't release the dopamine uh, when we primarily when we accomplish the goal or after the goal. It's on the steps on the way to the goal. So that's why when we're really seeking something, really desiring something and working towards it, we feel very fulfilled. So why people in third world countries are actually happier in some cases than people in very affluent countries. But once we get to that goal, then we no longer feel the same satisfaction.
Hmm.
It's the same. We got Christmas coming up. The kids are so excited when they're anticipating the gifts. When they actually get the gifts, it doesn't take long before they feel it doesn't give them the same level of excitement, right? Or a student who's anticipating the summer holidays. It's so exciting to reach there, but when the holidays come, they're depressed. There's nothing to do. They're bored. They're lonely. So again, well, the antidote to this is contextualizing the work within the context of our higher ideals, because we can always grow in those ideals. We can always strive towards those, and our work is just one means of doing so. So yeah, I would really advocate for people to identify their higher purpose for working and see their work as contributing to that, and see other areas of their life as contributing.
Is there any science behind the mind of people that normally seek for goals that seems unachievable?
Hmm. That's a good question. Nothing immediately comes to mind. That's something for me to research. Thanks for bringing that up.
Let's move to another topic that is very, very important for entrepreneurs. How do you know what signs tells you that you went too far and this is not the stress anymore, but this is burnout and you got to stop and you got to do something?
Good question. Um, so I think one thing is brain fog, the mental fatigue there. The adrenaline makes us sharp, whereas burnout is making us dull. Um, and then also just like physical sensations, like you're just your eyes need to rest. Your posture is slouching. You're experiencing pain in your wrists and elbows because of just being in the same position. So just looking at the overall body, it's good for us to us to get those 10,000 steps and to have put our heart in the moderate range of activity throughout the day, at least, and throughout the week. Um, so I think the more people tune into the internal experience of their minds and bodies, the more we can naturally start to counteract this, which is one pitch for um, actually depending less on the wearable devices, because all of those provide data for us. It also detaches us from our own experience of our body, which I think is very valuable.
How, so how can can an entrepreneur, right, that needs to be connected all the time, how can detach of these gadgets that take us to the that probably affect your psychology, but also you need them to work?
Devices like smartphone, which are also a cause of distraction and addiction.
Mhm.
And I would just approach it as just ask yourself, who's in charge? Am I in charge, or is the smartphone in charge? In other words, do I turn to the smartphone when I need to use it as a tool, or does the smartphone control when it gets my attention and how it gets my attention? Um, so I really like the flipped model of I'm in charge and I will turn to the phone when I need it. So maybe, and having some time in the day protected for deep work, deep concentration. Cal Newport has another book on this called Deep Work. He's a very high functioning individual. So even if that's as little as 1 hour a day, when I shut down all notifications, just to sharpen my mind and really go deep, that's very helpful. And hopefully that we can make a habit of that throughout the day. Maybe just check notifications like every hour, once an hour, or maybe even less than that if you're able to. And I realize not all positions have that luxury.
So, but the main thing is that for most people, including myself, the possibility of saying I'm not using my smartphone, uh, it already controlling me, can kind of like, um, what can you do at that point?
That's right. And so this is a topic I speak on nationally because it's of such importance. I think there's two approaches. You can have the gradual approach or the cold turkey all at once approach. So the all at once approach is let's do a screen fast. Let's go 7 days or 2 weeks without the screen, or even a total dopamine fast without other forms of entertainment. So obviously that's more challenging. Maybe you can do that if you're on vacation, but it's more difficult. But it's very cleansing. The more gradual approach would be seeing your life as winning back territory. So maybe right now the smartphone occupies 90% of the territory of one's life. But let's win that back little by little. Maybe I can bring back maybe I can bring back Sunday mornings at least. Having the phone not on my body on Sunday mornings, and maybe eventually expand that to all of Sunday, or maybe only check the phone a couple times on Sunday. Maybe winning back. Okay, the first 15 minutes of each morning, I'm not going to have my phone on me, and at least have that moment of silence, and then expand that to half an hour or an hour. So just winning back territory. And I don't think this requires missing a lot of important things, because there's probably not much of a difference between checking the phone once an hour versus checking the phone every single time that I get a notification. Or maybe if an hour seems like too daunting, like once every half hour. Anyways, some ideas.
That's interesting because and it's true. Many times I feel like my mind is playing tricks on me, right? It's like telling me you need to answer this email right now. Check if and the reality is, if I don't, nothing happens.
Mm.
So, but the point there is, how can we know, right? That is, if it is reality or not.
The way you convince your mind is by running experiments and seeing what happens. So the experiment is, if I don't check my phone for 1 hour, what will happen? What do I fear will happen? I fear that my most important client will contact me and then get annoyed because I didn't respond within an hour, and then he'll fire me, for example. So that's the hypothesis. Then let's run the test. Let's put the phone away for an hour, come back to it, check it. What happened? What happened? And probably 90%, 95% of the time, as you're saying, 99% of the time, nothing of significance was lost. And so the more we run that experiment and see the results, the more we convince our brain that actually it's going to be fine.
We, when you're a high impact entrepreneur, companies growing more like, I don't know, 50%, 100% year over year or more sometimes, right? Your company is different every so many months, right? Which means it is a lot of uncertainty. What's the connection between uncertainty and burnout, and how can you deal with that?
One characteristic of people with anxiety or sadness, depression or obsessive thoughts is the need for certainty. So it's actually, there's nothing wrong with the uncertainty. In fact, it's probably helpful to lean into it. That means that we're growing. If we're uncertain, it means we're in a new space, and that's where the opportunities are in the new spaces. So actually, it probably would be a good skill to develop is comfort with being uncomfortable, being tolerance of the uncertainty, which is actually a measured. It is a measurable characteristic in psychology, and we do find that people who are more tolerant with uncertainty are less likely to be anxious and depressed.
We are getting to the end of this interview, and we're going to rapid fire. What's leadership in one word?
Oh man,
or in a few words.
Bringing out the best in others.
Okay. The most underrated leadership habit?
Humility.
One daily practice you never skip?
Times of silence.
Book every leader should read?
Outward mindset.
One toxic behavior you wish all leaders would eliminate?
Complaining.
Harder, leading a team or leading yourself?
Leading yourself is primary.
One sentence every burnout founder needs to hear?
Slow down. It's going to be okay.
I love that one. A virtue leaders need to rediscover today.
Virtue, magnanimity,
Explain that one, please.
greatness of soul, the desire to accomplish great things in your life and seeing petty things as below you.
One practice that instantly improved leadership clarity.
Think time.
Johann, thank you very much for your time. It was fantastic having you here. How can people contact you?
You can check out my website, valuesfirsttherapy.com. I love working with high-performing individuals with anxiety or distraction to reach their peak performance.
Is it possible to change the way you behave and have a more healthier life?
Absolutely. It's transformative and liberating, and it's happened to me, and I practice these skills every day to reach my own peak performance in my own small way.
Johann, thank you very much.
Thanks, Juan.